Today, we're going to talk about something absolutely fundamental to our planet, the carbon cycle. Think of it like Earth's ultimate recycling program, but for the most important building block of life itself.
All right, let's just jump right in with a question for you. What do you, a diamond, and the air you just exhaled, what do they all have in common? The answer? It's carbon. I mean, it is literally everywhere, it's in everything, and that incredible journey it takes is exactly what we're going to explore.
So here's what we've got on tap. We'll start with the planet's carbon warehouses, then we'll see how carbon actually travels. We're also going to look at the cycle's two different speeds, humanity's, heavy hand in all this, and finally, we'll hit the bottom line. Okay, so what is the carbon cycle really? At its heart, it's just the constant movement of carbon atoms, between the atmosphere, living things, the oceans, and the Earth itself. Now, here's a key takeaway. It's a gaseous cycle, and all that really means is that a huge chunk of the action, the real exchange of carbon, is happening right up there in the air. All right, first up, let's figure out where all this carbon is even stored. You can think of these places as the planet's gigantic carbon warehouses.
Yeah, this table gives a really good snapshot. You see, in the atmosphere, it's mostly CO2. In the oceans, it's dissolved CO2 or something called bicarbonate. In living things like you and me, it's what we call organic carbon. And then, way deep underground, it's locked away as fossil fuels like coal and oil. So each warehouse stores carbon in a totally different way.
But let's pause and focus on the oceans for a second, because this is super important. The oceans are the single largest active carbon reservoir on the entire planet. What that means is they're a massive, dominant player in this whole global balancing act, constantly pulling in and pushing out carbon.
Okay, so we know where the carbon is stored, but how does it actually get from one warehouse to another? Let's take a look under the hood at the machinery of this giant recycling program.
This part of the cycle is really all about life itself. It all kicks off with plants, right? They pull CO2 out of the air using photosynthesis. That's basically the front door for carbon into the food web. Then, when organisms like us breathe out, we release CO2 right back. And finally, when things die, tiny decomposers get to work and break them down, sending that carbon back into the system. It's this beautiful, self-sustaining loop.
But there's another big piece of the puzzle: combustion. See, when we burn things, think fossil fuels, think forests, we're releasing just enormous amounts of stored carbon into the atmosphere. And the key thing is, we're doing it fast, like incredibly fast. And this, right here, is where human activity really starts to shake things up. And that brings us back to the oceans again. There's this constant back and forth of CO2 between the air and the surface of the sea. The oceans are basically breathing in carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. They act as this gigantic carbon sink, and that plays an absolutely vital role in keeping the planet's climate in check. So here's something interesting. This whole global recycling program doesn't just have one speed setting. It actually runs on two totally different timelines. There's a fast lane and a slow lane. Let's break that down.
This comparison really lays it all out. Over on the left, that's the fast cycle. It's all biological, all about living things. This is that day-to-day, year-to-year loop of photosynthesis and breathing that we just talked about. But then on the right, you've got the slow cycle. This one is geological. We're talking millions of years here, as carbon gets slowly locked away into rocks and fossil fuels. So for millions and millions of years, these two cycles were in this really delicate balance. But then, in just the last couple of centuries, a new force came along and put a heavy thumb right on the scale. And that force? It was us.
So what are we actually doing to interfere?
Well, it's pretty simple. By burning all these fossil fuels, we're taking carbon that was safely tucked away in that slow geological cycle, and we're pumping it into the fast atmospheric cycle at a mind-boggling rate. And to make matters worse, with deforestation, there are just fewer trees around to soak up all that extra CO2.
And the consequences of knocking this system out of whack, they're huge. More CO2 in the atmosphere means more trapped heat, which leads to global warming. And as the oceans soak up more of that CO2, they literally become more acidic, which is a massive threat to marine life. It all just adds up to a major disruption of the very system that's supposed to keep our planet's climate stable. All right, let's bring this all home and get to the bottom line. To make sure these key points really stick, we're going to bust a couple of common myths.
Okay, first one. True or false? The carbon cycle is a sedimentary cycle, meaning it's mostly about rocks and soil. What do you think?
That's going to be false, and it's a super common mix-up.
While sure, rocks and sediment are part of that super slow cycle, the main event, the dominant, active part of the cycle, is gaseous. It's what's happening up in our atmosphere. All right, next one. True or false? The oceans play a pretty minor role when it comes to storing the planet's carbon.
Oh, that is absolutely 100% false. As we've seen, the oceans are the undisputed heavyweight champion of active carbon storage. They are a massive sink, constantly pulling in gigantic amounts of CO2 from the atmosphere.
So if you had to boil this whole complicated process down to just one single sentence, this is it right here. The carbon cycle is a gaseous cycle that links up all the different parts of the Earth system, and its number one job is to maintain balance and regulate our climate.
And that really leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? For thousands and thousands of years, the carbon cycle held this natural balance. We've now tipped those scales. We've disrupted a system that has supported life on this planet for millions of years. So the question for us now is, what's it going to take to tip them back?